everyone, and trust you're doing great today. Welcome to the third episode of National Innovation Systems and Absorptive Capacity, developing National Innovation Systems for Absorptive Capacity. My name is Toro Modara. It's such a joy, such a pleasure, such a delight to have you with us. We're always glad to have you with us. Hope you have been fine, enjoying the month of January. For those in the United States, thank God for a peaceful transition of power yesterday and the upholding of democratic institutions. For those of us in the rest of the world, hope we're doing well. Hope we're also getting as involved as possible in leadership, in policy shaping. For those of us who are policy shapers and policy influencers, we also hope that you're gleaning valuable insights from this program and other programs on Navigate Radio Communications to help ensure that we can give citizens and humanity the best possible, right? So today we're going to do, as always, a quick recap of what we captured last week, right? The things we talked on last week, and then we'll proceed from there to the main highlights, the main concerns of today's program or today's episode. So last week we talked about the National Innovation System being a nation structure for enhancing its innovation competitiveness on the global scale. I repeat, last week we said a national innovation system is a nation structure for enhancing its innovative competitiveness on the global scale. And please take note of the word structure is comprehensive, right? And that's also one of the things we'll be speaking further to today. When you talk about structure, it's not a mono component, very important, right? A structure is a system, a structure is full scale, a structure is robust, a structure is comprehensive, and a structure consists of different interrelated parts, right? And if that structure is not in place, even if we may have creative outputs, like we've been saying, we are not likely to have overall innovation outcomes, especially the kind that can produce economic and social development impact, which is the thrust of this program. It's not just about developing national innovation systems, but developing national innovation systems for absorptive capacity. Absorptive capacity, their meaning, the ability to enhance the economic and social development possibilities for your nation, extremely important. So a national innovation system is a nation structure for enhancing its innovative competitiveness on the global scale. Very, very important. We also said last week that it is a network. Again, we're emphasizing some words, right? System, structure, network. It is a network of related institutions, government agencies, mechanisms, public sector organizations, and policies, even private sector organizations, and policies which are articulated, managed, and coordinated to enhance innovation in a nation. And I think I'm going to say that again. It is a network of related institutions, government agencies, mechanisms, private sector organizations, and policies which are first articulated, then managed and coordinated to enhance innovation in a nation, right? One thing we emphasized a lot last week is that innovation is not always about creating something entirely new. Sometimes innovation is about expanding what has been created, perfecting what has been created so that you can then scale what has been created. And many times the absorptive capacity, the economic performance expected from innovation will not come until it has been scaled. In fact, I would almost say 100% of the time, right? You will not profit to a large extent until there is scaling. So this process, I need to let you know that even this process of expanding what has been created requires that coordination, because many times it is not the person who creates that scales. It is not where the creation came from that the scaling comes from. Right? Many times a coordination will have to happen to ensure that there is an optimization of the creation. So recreation, expansion, scaling will often take more than the simple creation. So let me give you an example. So last week, during the course of the week, between last episode and this episode, I was listening to a couple of interviews and reports about a Nigerian-American young lady of about 12 years old, Eniola Shokunbi, who perfected an air filter system in the United States, right? Eniola Shokunbi, you can Google her name on YouTube or read more about her. Now, what she did not create the air filter system. What she did was she was being taught. She probably went on a trip, like an excursion, like, and then she heard about the air filter system, or she read about the air filter, they were taught in class, and she decided to take it further and communicate with the scientists who, designed the system. She didn't design the initial system. So she reached out to them, they responded to her, and she decided to take a step further to act on the design they had sent and to try to create. She was able to create it. And when she created it, it worked. And by the time it worked, she got noticed. And eventually, the state where she is actually devoting about $11.5 million for the scaling of what she created. So look at it. Some scientists designed it. They designed it. She got in touch with them. They explained further on what could be done. She took their guidance. She took it. She made the first. She produced the first one. It worked. She produced a couple more. It worked. And eventually, her state decided to devote $11.5 million to fund the expansion of what was created. Look at that system. It began with the scientists, like I was saying last week, the town and the gown. It began with those in the gown, right? The academics, those in the university. Remember last week we talked about innovation, and I'm still going to come to that in the recap. We said last week that there could be three possible structures for the research and development part of innovation. Three possible structures. One, the university laboratory/research institute. Two, the government facilities. And three, the industrial research laboratories, right? Three possible structures for the research and development part of innovation: the university laboratories or research institute, the government facilities, and the industrial research laboratory. So in this case, the initial creation of the template was done by the universities, and we've said that in the last two episodes that many times a lot of the creation originates from the universities. However, the testing because before there can be a recreation, there has to be, for instance, a piloting, and then you're not just piloting for piloting's sake, you're piloting to know what needs to be improved. The recreation part of innovation, like I said, and many times the universities or the research institutes are not the users of what has been created. So there needs to be a coordination between the town, where you will often find the users, and the gown, where you will often find the initiators. So those were some of the, that's just a practical example of how innovation is a system and how innovation requires that structure. Now, we are emphasizing on this program for there to be deliberate policies and processes in place. Let me give you a simple example. I dare say that innovation fund was not just suddenly established. There would likely have been an innovation fund set aside for that purpose. And when Eniola Shokunbi's advancement and with what had been designed, production of what had been designed qualified, she would definitely receive the funds for that. So right now, she's been asked to do or to lead the design of more of such air filters for the schools in her state. And what is happening here is now the scaling. Having first gone from the design to the production to some perfection, and now we are going to scaling. So these processes are what we've been emphasizing on this program. Now, I need to say this very quickly, that the National Innovation System is very critical to enhancing the creative output. And that's why we've kept saying that there's a difference between creativity and innovation. Innovation is the whole system. Creativity happens on many levels. For instance, I also heard about young Nigerian students now in Nigeria who created a generator that can be fueled by urine. Can you imagine? Nigeria is currently still having challenges with stable electricity, and they spend a lot on fueling. A lot of businesses have a lot of their overheads being sunk into powering their businesses, even homes, but also businesses. Now imagine that young Nigerian students created a generator which could be powered by urine. Very similar in terms of the creative output that Eniola Shokunbi, a Nigerian American, also demonstrated. The difference, however, is that there was already a national innovation system in place to take what she created or what she produced from the design that had been done to take it further. Now, I don't want to comment on whether such system exists in Nigeria. I'm not too sure that we have such. And so it's important to create the national innovation system that ensures that we can move from creativity to innovation, especially the kind of innovation that would produce absorptive capacity. That's the capacity to lead to economic performance, to lead to economic and social development and competitiveness on a global scale level. Extremely important. I'm going to wrap up the highlights from last week very quickly for the sake of time. Please feel free to go to our YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can listen to last week's episode, right? These days, we upload the recordings immediately on YouTube. There's so much to talk about today. I have to go into the depth of today. But let me just add one more thing very quickly to lay the foundation of today's topic. Last week, we said the scalability of innovation often comes through a process, right? That's a process of variegation, that is trying and retrying, learning and adapting. Because what Eniola Shokunbi did was she adapted what the scientists had created, and that's the process of innovation. It's often, it takes a lot of coordination. Very, very important. So today, let me quickly go to some of the things we'll be talking about for today. The highlight of today's program, today's episode, the main thrust of today's episode is what I would like to term innovation as coordination. I repeat, innovation as coordination. Like I said, this is one theory I've been emphasizing, but I want to focus a little bit more on it. We'll be talking about the fact that it's a network. We'll be talking about the fact that it's a system, right? And I just showed one practical example. Now, last week we talked about the town and gown, the need for research laboratories, and especially the university research laboratories and the users who are often more of the industrial laboratories, right? We talked about that last week. That coordination we've spoken to a lot, but we want to go a little bit further to another kind of coordination that is required, right? We've talked about industrial laboratories and universities, but we now want to look at system designers and component suppliers. I repeat, system designers and component suppliers. So in some cases, especially with electrical manufacturing, with the manufacturing of electrical innovations, especially when we are scaling or more complex systems, right? Because some kinds of innovative products can be more complex than the others, right? Especially when it comes to the manufacturing of more complex products. There are often two segments, right? There are those that design the overall system, and some innovation is needed at that level, but there are also those that manufacture the components, and their innovation is also very, very critical. Right? I'm going to say that again. We are talking a little bit more about the coordination. Today, we are looking at innovation as coordination. We started talking about it from the beginning, but we are emphasizing it more, right? Innovation as coordination. And now we want to talk about the innovation that is important between the designers of the overall system and the manufacturers of some components. Let me give us a quick example. So let's go back to the airline space, right? We've been talking a bit about aircraft, about aerodynamics, and so on and so forth. So let's draw an example from that field again. So for instance, when you're trying to improve upon the manufacturing of an existing airplane, right? There would be the overall designers, right? The system designers, right? The product as an entire system, because the airplane is a complex product. It's not, for instance, an air filter in this case, right? Because the airplane is a complex product, there would often be those that are manufacturing several components, parts of the airplane. Several components. There is the engine, there are the wings. So even within the engine, there are many sub-parts of the aircraft, right? So there is the need for the I don't just want to use the word effective. I want to use the word excellent, top-notch coordination between the suppliers and the system assemblers, right? Not just the system designers, but as well as the system assemblers. Now, again, the research and development will be happening at both scales. In other words, designing a component of a complex system might be equal to designing a totally new product, right? So it's almost as if those who are designing a particular component of an aircraft may almost be said to be designing a product on their own. And so the research and development that is required for components manufacturing is almost equal to the same as that required for some completely new products, right? So we have to focus on the innovation, the research and development necessary for those different components. Then the effective assembling of the different components parts requires a level of innovation on its own. Let me break that down. So it's not just enough to manufacture the different parts, the different components of an aircraft as innovatively as possible and to put all the creative thought into that. It's also critical to now ensure that the process of assembling these different components is similarly as innovative as possible. Do you understand? It's almost like saying there's something called assembling engineering. So there is the production engineering, very, very important, the production of different components parts, but there's also the assembling engineering. And this is an area where significant coordination is needed as well. Now, for some nations, you will find that coordination happening at the market level. Let me give the example of the aircraft again. So sometimes in some nations, or in some industries, or with some producers or buyers, they would actually the market will take the lead, right? They will sit down with the components and also the assemblers and request the kind of changes they want to see, for instance, to an airplane. I think I read that when the Boeing, I think 747 or 767 was about to, when they wanted to have new aircraft designs, the manufacturers did not even proceed to the advanced design stage until they had, effectively coordinated with the major airline aircraft buyers, the major airlines. Now, this was easier. Interacting directly with the major buyers was easier because you have a relatively small number of buyers compared to, for instance, computers. That's another area. Maybe we'll talk more about that next week. That's another area where a lot of components come together. That device you're holding in your hand, whether it's a laptop, whether it's a phone, has a lot of components. And that's why in America, you will find, for instance, that the production of chips, CHIPS, became a major issue, right? For the outgone Biden administration, they're trying to bring back. I believe they were trying to bring back the manufacturing of more chips into the United States, because it's not just when you see that product, several components come together, and how effectively those products are manufactured, how innovatively they are designed and produced, would impact the overall effectiveness of the innovative product you have in your hand, right? And its scalability and its economic performance and so on and so forth. South Korea, for instance, became very critical because a number of the chips were being produced outside of the United States, and even some assembling was being done there. So those component parts were very important. But how these component parts, let me go back to the aircraft, how these component parts will be innovatively assembled is also a critical part of the innovation. Now, what is the responsibility of those who are creating the National Innovation Policy, who are responsible for designing the National Innovation System, is to facilitate that coordination, right? For instance, in some industries, government programs actually fund the coordination between the suppliers, when I say the suppliers of the components part and the assemblers, right? And I think that's very important. Now, again, everything does not have to be led by government. Like we said last week, like we said 2 weeks ago, some innovations are totally government-led, some innovations are market-led. Sometimes you also have government and market coming together, but definitely policymakers are responsible for articulating the national innovation policy that would address the need for a wholesome, robust, and efficient coordination between these different parts. Remember, again, we are looking at innovation as coordination, right? The coordination, if I may use that word, the coordination criticality in innovation, how it's very critical to innovation. Remember, innovation is not just producing, it's not just making that initial design, it's not just designing, the first product, which is beautiful, right? The idea, the thoughts, the template. If by the time you're talking about innovation, you can't talk about innovation without economic performance. You can't talk about economic performance without scalability. And therefore, there needs to be a lot of creation and recreation, and that requires a lot of coordination. Thank you very much for being with us this beautiful Tuesday, January 21st, 2025. My name is Tolu Modera. This is Amoge Radio Communications, and we're on the program Developing National Innovation Systems for Absorptive Capacity. Today, our focus is on innovation as a coordination, right? Very, very important. Now, let's look at another. We've talked about the need for system, the overall system designers and the manufacturers of the component part to coordinate effectively, especially with complex technologies, right? It's very important for there to be that effective coordination between the assemblers and the designers of the different coordination part. Now, let's talk a little bit about when government programs facilitates this coordination. Again, it's not just government that has to lead it, the market has a role to play, but government should definitely articulate the policies guiding this, right? Supporting this, facilitating this, enhancing this. Now, in some cases when government programs fund that coordination, one thing they've also done is that they ensure that the technologies for, if I can use that word, for assembling, right, the integration of the different component parts and into an overall system that has been designed by the system designers, right? They ensure that this process of coordinating between the system designers and the component manufacturers is supported in such a manner that there would be overall gains for all. Very, very important. Let me quickly mention, though, that the size of the system, right, the size of the overall system being produced may determine the number of critical components, right? And let me go back to the example of the aircraft, for instance. Many aircraft producers, could rely on thousands of component suppliers because the aircraft is a much more bigger system, for instance, than the device you're holding, right? So sometimes you find government programs coming in to support the coordination between suppliers and component suppliers and designers of smaller systems in comparison to, for instance, an aircraft, right? So take note of that. The size of the system and the number of critical components required to be produced for that system may determine how much of mediation, if I can put it that way, is required, because sometimes government comes in to add as a mediator between the market, the users, and between the market, the users, the components producers, and the overall designers, right? But the size of and the complexity of the overall product being designed, being assembled may determine how much of that coordination is required. Well, I think we're going to call it a day at this point on this program. We're going to continue next week, still in this flow of innovation as coordination, right? Very, very important. My charge today to those listening is it is your responsibility, especially if you're a policymaker or a policy influencer, it is your responsibility to ensure that systems, policies, especially policies and strategies are in place to ensure this effective coordination, not just between the town and ground, like we said last week, but also between component suppliers, component manufacturers, and system designers, to facilitate it, to stimulate it, to incentivize it. Whatever you need to do, it's your responsibility. And in places where the market is taking the lead, especially when there are a smaller number of buyers, as in the case of the aircraft manufacturers, just be aware of the coordination that is happening there and support it, and where necessary, scale it. Otherwise, where you have smaller number of where the product being designed is smaller, and therefore there is probably less need for direct market engagement between the component producers and the system designers. So, in other words, where there are a much larger number of users, for instance, the devices in our hands, there are millions of people using it. So it's not like the number of those using the aircraft, where you have a smaller number of airlines that can come together. In such cases, government programs may be important to step in and ensure better coordination. In other words, government may be the voice of the users, like the airline users who buy the aircraft, and can step in and directly talk about how they want this program, this component assembled. I hope I've made some sense to you today. I look forward to being back with you same time, same station next week. My name is Tolu Omadara. It's been nice doing this with you. Remember, we talked about innovation as coordination today. We look forward to being back with you same time, same station next week. Until then, please follow us on Facebook, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Instagram, and of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Is very important. You will find these and lots of other programs by my colleagues, fantastic, policy-rich, evidence-based programs that are very inspirational, inspiring, instructive, and illuminating. My colleagues will continue from Wednesday through Saturday. We'll be with you 11 a.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. West African time every day of the week. Thank you very much again, and have a good week. Bye.